Start.
All right.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Raw Men. I think we're on episode number 84 and doing a little bit different tack than what we normally do. We're talking to somebody that's in charge of it or is working on an elephant sanctuary in Tennessee. I'm speaking with Joy Owens. And Joy, how did we have an elephant sanctuary in Tennessee of all places?
In Tennessee, of all places. Well, first of all, I'm not in charge of anything. I always like to say that. I am the education manager for the Elephant Sanctuary. So I do a lot of programs like this, usually with younger students, but talk to people really all over the world about the Elephant Sanctuary and about elephants in general. So, how in the world did an elephant sanctuary end up in a town of 3,000 people in the middle of Tennessee? Well, our founders actually owned an elephant. They owned an elephant named Tara. They had owned her since she was probably 2 years old and trained her to do all sorts of things. Trained her to roller skate. She was in TV shows. She was in an episode of Little House on the Prairie. So she traveled and she performed with our founders all over the world. As Tara got older, they kind of had a change of heart. They started to think like, is this really the best life for her? Is traveling, constantly not having one home base and not being around other elephants, is that really the best thing for Tara? We've learned more and more, of course, how social elephants really are. We know, they grow up in a herd, they live with their family their whole life, but we're learning constantly just how important that herd is. And Tara didn't have a herd, she was traveling with her owners, but she didn't have any other elephants to interact with. So they began to formulate this idea of a sanctuary, of a place where performing elephants or zoo elephants, or really any captive elephants that were looking for retirement, could go to one, have other elephants to interact with, have a herd, and two, to have space. That's the other thing. A lot of captive elephants don't have a ton of space. And we know in the wild, they can walk, up to 30 miles a day. Obviously, in zoos and in circuses, that's not happening. So they were trying to find somewhere they could give Tara and other elephants lots of land, lots of natural habitat to explore. They looked at several locations, not just Tennessee, but they were looking for a place where you can get more bang for your buck, so to speak. So land was, cheaper in Tennessee than say Southern California. And so that's why Tennessee ended up being the choice. Also, Tennessee has a pretty mild climate. We don't get really, really harsh winters. You don't want to put an elephant sanctuary like in New England where you're snowing and having really cold temperatures half the year. Obviously, Tennessee's not a perfect replica of an African savanna or an Asian jungle, but the weather stays fairly moderate, so the elephants can withstand it. And when it does get below freezing, we have big heated elephant barns that the elephants can go into, so they can stay comfortable even when the weather is not totally perfect for them. So that's kind of how we ended up in Hohenwald in 1995, so 23 years ago now. Oh, I lost you. I can't hear
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, I understand that there was also there's like a chimpanzee sanctuary in one of these southern states because, as you said, the winters aren't that harsh, and so
Mm-hmm.
for at least 9 months out of the year, you can get a pretty good replica, and then of course they've got some kind of barn set up for it. So you're setting up elephants that were previous performers.
Mm-hmm.
Is there an industry for that anymore?
Yes, actually. So a lot of people think, Barnum and Bailey's closed down, the Ringling Brothers have closed down. That must mean like there's no more performing elephants. But that's really not the case. There are still several small family circuses that are still traveling and performing with elephants. Obviously, nowhere near what there used to be, but there's probably still 60 plus elephants traveling with these small family circuses and still performing. So we could potentially be a retirement home for those elephants. But we also take elephants from zoos that, maybe no longer want to continue their elephant program. Maybe it's too expensive or they can't, provide enough space in the zoo setting. We take them from like wild animal parks, really anywhere that owns an elephant. And there is over 400 captive elephants in the US, and we have 11. So there's definitely, a lot more elephants out there that might potentially need a sanctuary, because another way we might end up with these elephants, what we've seen in the past is once they start aging, just like aging people, they start racking up, health concerns. They need more care, and some owners are just not capable, or not financially able to take care of a 60-plus-year-old elephant who has arthritis and all of these other issues. So we're also here to provide care for those elephants who maybe just can't be taken care of by the people who used to take care of them, and are looking for a facility that is really set up for the care of those aging elephants.
These elephants that you get, I mean, I would imagine that you've got diverse backgrounds that they're coming from, and so different kind of psychologies. I mean, elephants that were taken care of, like in a zoo. I mean, and I'm having a hard time understanding a zoo that wouldn't have an elephant. I mean, what kind of what kind of a zoo would you be if you can't have an elephant? But okay, I can see getting elephants from zoos, and maybe they're okay, but then certain other elephants might have had a really disastrous prior situation. Can you tell me how you account for that, or give me examples?
Yeah, so the sanctuary is a really interesting place. None of these elephants knew each other before they came here. So I always tell the kids, it's like you're going to a new school and you've got to make new friends. On top of that, some of these elephants have never been around other elephants. So not only do they have to make friends, they have to learn like what making a friend even means. And so when we get a new elephant, we don't just throw them in there with the rest of the residents. We're like, here you go, like fend for yourself, because they do come from really, really different places and really interesting backgrounds. So when we're introducing a new elephant to the herd, it's done really, really slowly. So for the first days, weeks, months, however long it takes, that elephant is separated from the rest of the elephants. They can still see and smell and hear the other elephants. They definitely know they are there, but they're not sharing physical space. These are, really large, many thousands of pounds animals. And so they can, do some damage without even meaning to. But they can see the other elephants, and we really monitor their behavior. So are they showing signs of fear? Are they showing signs of anxiety? Or are they showing signs of curiosity and showing signs that they want to interact with other elephants? If we see that, we'll start to move them closer together. So we'll let the elephants share a fence line, so the elephants can then reach out and touch the other elephants and communicate with them more physically, and it's a progression from there. So as we continue to see positive behavior and positive social interaction, those elephants will spend more time together. We call them play dates, so they will actually get to like share the same physical space, share the same part of the habitat, and that time increases as their positive social interaction increases. And it's all done on the elephant's time. So if the elephant is just like, no, thank you, I do not want to be near any other elephants, that is totally up to them. That is their right and their option at the sanctuary. So we have some elephants here who, even after years, prefer to spend more time alone, whereas we have other elephants like Ronnie. Ronnie always wants to be around other elephants. She always wants to be interacting. And so we do, because we see these elephants every day, we really know their personalities, and we can really monitor these interactions and know their behaviors, so we can kind of make the best decisions for them as far as how they interact with the rest of the herd.
Yeah, I'm interested in the psychology of this, because I mean, you're talking about like going your first day of school, except that it's your first day of school and you were raised by wolves.
Yeah.
So you are the most socially awkward anyone can ever be. I mean, I imagine that you would have some situations are like that. I mean, the elephant that after years still wants to be alone. Are they coming from an environment that kind of produces that behavior, or is this something that could just naturally occur?
So it's a little bit of both. I think every elephant is different, and of course, we can't read their minds. We can't ask them exactly why they're feeling that way, but we do know that some of our most anxious elephants have, we know their life histories, and they tend to be a harsher life history. So, for example, Billy is one of the elephants who spends a lot of time alone. Billy was a circus elephant. She performed for many years, but Billy was labeled as a stubborn elephant, as a hard to train elephant. And what that meant for Billy is that her trainers decided basically to chain her in a barn for, days on end, for 20 hours a day. And she was basically not allowed to interact with other elephants because she got this label of being aggressive. And
I look at elephants as being, among the most intelligent non-human mammals there are, and so
absolutely.
what damage would happen to a person in that kind of confinement? I mean, we're talking about things that we want to imagine that our ability to communicate and all of that is innate. We know that there are so many learned behaviors that if you're not in that critical period of development, if you don't learn these behaviors, you strangely never will.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have to wonder about the condition that some of the elephants might be in when you get them. I don't know if you have anything more you can comment on that. If not, I have another question.
Well, I would just say that, again, every elephant is different and we have to approach them differently. So, even if they've been labeled an aggressive elephant or a anxious elephant or a loner elephant, we don't take that label as law. We prefer to watch their actual behaviors because a lot of those behaviors will change when they come to the sanctuary. And so even Billy, she spends a lot of time alone right now, but she did have elephant friends at the sanctuary before. Those elephants have passed away and she hasn't made new friends. But we saw Billy, over time really come out of her shell and really start to show signs of wanting to interact, wanting to be with other elephants, wanting to explore more. So I would say, their psychology can be all over the place when they get here, but we do see often a lot of changes in that. We don't just accept it as like, this is what the elephant's going to be like for the rest of their life, just because that's how they were labeled where they were previously.
Well, it's kind of fascinating the way that you're taking a deeply, I don't know, the psychology aspect of it as a psychological treatment, or that's the way that these elephants are being taken care of. It's like a nursing home sort of
Yeah.
environment, more or less.
Oh, yeah. We say that all the time. We are truly a nursing home, truly a retirement home. A lot of people ask us if we have, baby elephants or young elephants. We do not. Our youngest elephant is 34, so she is like a middle-aged elephant. But yeah, we're definitely a retirement home, and that's really kind of indicative of our priority is to provide individualized care for these elephants for the rest of their life,
Is it
whatever that entails.
is it just coincidence that they happen to be older and don't breed anymore?
It's not coincidence. We very specifically do not breed our elephants. We just don't believe in bringing more elephants into a captive environment, even at the sanctuary where, we think we're doing a really good job of providing a captive lifestyle for these elephants. It's still not the same as being a wild elephant. It's still not as good as being in a wild environment with your family herd. Also, we have all females at the sanctuary, so that's not really a problem or an issue that would come up for us. But even if we did have males and females, we would not breed them.
Now, this raises another question because I was aware that there is another elephant sanctuary in one of these southern states. Maybe it's Alabama. I don't know. But do they have all males?
No, so there's another sanctuary in California called Pause, and then there's a new sanctuary opening up it's like on the Georgia-Florida line. Pause has some male elephants and some female elephants. There's a couple of reasons that we personally don't. One big reason is there's just way more female elephants in captivity in North America than males. So I think, there's 150 female Asian elephants and there's like 40 male Asian elephants in captivity. So there's just less males in the population that could come up for retirement. Also, you would have to keep them separate. In the wild, adult male elephants and adult female elephants live in separate herds. They have separate social lives, separate social structures. So if we were to have a male elephant at the sanctuary, we'd have to build him his own barn, his own habitat to live in. Since Paws already has a couple male elephants, it would make more sense for if a male was coming up for retirement to send them to Paws first, because they already have that male elephant herd in place. So, I mean, that's kind of the situation right now. It might change. We might end up with male elephants one day, I don't know, but right now we don't.
From your experience, from people that you just meet commonly, I mean, my perspective is probably going to be a little bit different than the average person on the streets. I mean, if you were talking to the average person on the street, what is it that you'd want them to know about the psychology of the elephant, or the treatment, or whatever you're most concerned about regarding these?
That's a good question. I think what I just would like to communicate is just how complex the animals are and how intelligent elephants truly are. And so their needs are really complex, their needs in captivity are so different than any other animals. And we're still learning, what those needs are. And so what I always try to communicate to people is when you see an elephant in captivity, to really like take time and to think about like what is provided for them in that habitat. How much space do they have? Do they have other elephants to interact with? Do they have place to move? Do they have mental stimulation, enrichment? Because it's not a matter of just putting an elephant in a space and letting them do their own thing. Like, they really need a lot more care and consideration than you would think at first glance.
I remember once upon a time seeing a spider monkey in a cage that looked to him, to his size, to be something equivalent to being locked in a phone booth.
Mm-hmm.
And it was in a pawn shop of all places. And you just imagine, how big a spider monkey is and how he's barely fitting into this cage. I mean, he has to stand up all the time that he's in this
Mm-hmm.
cage so like all day. And there's of course no other monkeys around. And then somebody else, I remember, happened across a chimpanzee in a pawn shop in a similar situation. These are
Mm-hmm.
highly intelligent animals. The idea of having them caged like that, if people were caged like that because we are intelligent and consequently complex, what would the damage be? And look how
Mm-hmm.
little we knew about primates. So I'm talking about maybe 30, 40 years ago. Look how much we've learned just in those last couple of decades. And I imagine the same, the situation is the same with elephants from what I hear.
Yes, yes, absolutely. I try to be really generous. We did not know, all the complex needs of elephants when we first started importing them to the US. And, Tara lived at a tire shop for the first couple months of her life in North America. Sissy, one of our elephants, lived at Six Flags in Texas. And people just didn't know that was not a good situation. They didn't realize how important space is to elephants and how important the herd and having other elephants around is. And I think, that's kind of how the sanctuary started, and why we get elephants retired, because people are starting to realize like keeping an elephant by itself in a small space is just not acceptable anymore. It's not what's healthy or best for the elephants. And so that's how, we end up with a lot of the elephants here. They were in circuses that have since gone under, or they were in zoos as a single elephant, and that zoo, started to realize like, oh, we can't keep this elephant by herself. That's not healthy for her, and that's how they end up here.
I'm gonna let you close with whatever else you see as the goal, uh, the ultimate mission, or what you would like to see happen in the future.
I mean, ideally, in a perfect world, we would be out of a job because there, would be no more captive elephants for us to take care of. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. I think our goal is to, one, to provide the best care we can for the elephants in our care, lifelong individualized care to their specific needs. And then two, our second goal as an organization is to really educate the public about, one, the complex needs of elephants in captivity, but also the crisis facing elephants in the wild. We haven't really talked a lot about that, but That is another big part of my job, is teaching, especially younger children, kind of what's going on with the wild elephant population, because that's just as important as, the captive elephants we take care of here. Wild elephant populations are endangered, and so we try to educate on that front as well.
Okay, and I'm going to include any links that you'd like me to share in the more info bar below. And Ms. Owens, is there anything else you'd like to say before we close?
No, thank you. Just thanks for talking with me today. And visitors can, learn more at elephants.com. It's the easiest domain name to remember, I think, ever. But yeah, just thanks for giving us a chance to talk about what we do.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
For those of you that stayed for part 2 of this interview, thank you very much. I'm interviewing Vanessa Gagne, who is representing Asian Elephant Support. So we're talking all about saving the elephants today. And Vanessa, how are you doing?
I'm doing great.
What can you tell me about what is the motivation behind, specifically an Asian Elephant Support, but in general, why are we doing an Asian support? What is it about?
Well, the motivation is specifically to bring awareness to the plight of the Asian elephant, in that it is a very different problem than that of what the Africans face. You think of ivory, you think of poaching when you think of African elephants. And while those are two important parts of what happens with Asian elephants, the real threat to Asian elephants is human-elephant conflict caused by deforestation for palm oil plantations. So if you think of islands like Borneo and Sumatra, they are being completely razed for palm oil, which is in everything we use, from toothpaste to deodorant to Jif peanut butter. And it is in such high demand. And because it is in such high demand, it is farmed unsustainably. And it's just tracts and tracts of land are taken for these palm oil plantations to raise the palm nut. And because of that, elephants are usually poisoned and or just outright shot and killed to keep them from raiding these crops, or keep them from hurting the farmers when they're protecting their crops and stuff like that. So it's a pretty big deal. We're losing them pretty fast.
Do you have any numbers?
I actually don't have any numbers.
I've heard some shocking figures from other people. I was watching an admission that this one guy made about trying to cultivate this area of Africa, that he approved the extermination of some 40,000 African elephants, and that he then realized the tragic mistake that he had made, and that was I think decades ago. And he's making this admission that this was his fault, and I'm like, 40,000 elephants were killed.
And that's about how many we have left in general of Asian elephants. So there's anywhere between 30 and 50,000 Asian elephants left. 1/3 of those live in human care in one of their range countries. And those range countries are divided among 13 range countries. So
now, can you tell me what a range country is?
Yeah, a range country is the country in which they are originally from. Of course, they don't know what a map is.
Yeah, no, you're talking about that live in human care. I mean, but we're not talking about like confined. Are we talking about the elephants who believe that they are wild?
No, elephants that live in human care. Elephants have been domesticated for thousands and thousands of years in places like Thailand and India. So they have been kept in temples or as a working animal alongside mahouts for thousands and thousands of years. So in a lot of these countries, they are, like, as you may know, revered as gods and the living incarnation of Ganesh in the Hindu faith. And that has stayed throughout other indigenous countries like Laos, Cambodia, and Thailand. And they're very highly a sacred animal, and they are treated as such in most cases. But yeah, like I said, 1/3 of them live in direct human care. So they are born, raised, bred in alongside humans. So they are not that many are really wild caught anymore. It does happen, but it's not very frequent. It's illegal in most range countries.
I see.
Mhm.
I'm not sure what to even inquire about that. I mean, I knew I was going to have to ask about the distinction between the Asian elephant concern and the African elephant concern. I had
Mhm.
no idea it was going to go, where you're talking about. I hadn't, in the previous interview, of course, that was just a sanctuary here in the United States. I wasn't hearing anything about it in the homelands, and I certainly never suspected anything about palm oil.
It's
It's
a big
disturbing.
problem. Yeah,
It's
so the thing about palm oil is, I'll just say that, elephants are considered to be ecological engineers, and they turn forest land into grassland. And grassland is a more biodiverse niche that animals can inhabit. But at the same time, they're ingesting the fruit and the seeds of these trees, and they pass through their gut. And a lot of these trees will not germinate. The seeds of these trees will not germinate unless they pass through the gut of a mega herbivore like an elephant or a rhinoceros. And they are also forest makers. So there's generation and generation following these migrations of elephants that are destroying forests, but at the same time replanting them because they're,
yeah.
providing this perfect manure pile for a new tree to grow in. So that being said, it's this very closely knit web of life. We just found out last year that they're an entire ecosystem of microbes that live in elephant footprints when it rains. So, I mean, we're talking very grand scale of animals that are affected by this palm oil um, deforestation problem. For example, the one-horned rhinoceros, tigers, clouded leopards, pangolins, hornbills, you name it. Anything that lives in Southeast Asia, orangutans, the worst. They're really getting it hit hard, the orangutans are.
Okay. Well, yeah. Yeah, I understand that your organization also did I read this correctly that you also support saving rhinos as well as tigers?
Absolutely. We have our veterinarians, some of the veterinarians that we work with are wildlife vets in general. So they are able to work with, I mean, we have some that have worked with Malayan sun bears and stuff like that and have been able to rehab them and re-release them. Snaring is a huge problem in the jungles. If it's not indigenous people, it's poachers and trappers, or it's even um, people that work for the palm oil people that will go out and snare and try and just kill the animals so they're not in the way anyway. So the snares are usually like people try to go out and disable them, which isn't really that easy. They're hidden for a reason. So that's a huge problem. But some animals can be rehabilitated and don't sustain really life-threatening injuries.
It's a little disturbing that we can't seem to share the planet with anything else.
It's it's really sad. I talk about it a lot with a really good girlfriend of mine who works for a sister elephant organization, if you want to call it that. And it's like, when do we get good news? We just don't get good news that often. So
What is the
it's
what's the solution to the situation if there is one?
something that you can do on your own is purchase and promote sustainable palm oil. I do not support an outright ban on palm oil because there are farmers who are feeding their families with palm oil and owning a small family owned plantation or farm. And it's not fair to tell them that they don't have a right to feed their family and their kids. What's not okay is when you have these giant Chinese corporate conglomerates come in, buy up everybody's palm oil plantation, and then put those people out of work anyway. I'm sure you've heard of this model before. It happens in America all the time with
Yeah.
American farmers and just corn or soybeans. So same thing is happening over there, and there's hardly any regulation because of the status of a lot of their governments. So what I try to tell people to do is do your research, find sustainably harvested palm oil products. And you can do that actually by downloading an app on your phone with a barcode scanner that's put out by the Cheyenne Mountain Zoo in Colorado. It's a palm oil app, and it tells you if it's orangutan friendly. And like I said, you can scan any barcode through there. And the Cheyenne Mountain Zoo also publishes for every holiday the best candy that you can buy that is the most friendly and uses the best practices for sustainable palm oil.
Do you? I would ask if you could to provide links that people can
Yeah,
find out about the palm oil thing, about the apps that you're talking about.
yeah.
Anything, of course, anything else you think that might be relevant. And I wasn't, because this is like a two-part interview. I wasn't going to do a very long one with you. I just want to make sure we get into everything that you want to impart to like your average person on the street. What do they know? What do they need to know about the plight of the Asian elephant? And anything you haven't already said, please chunk it in here.
I would also say that human elephant conflict is a giant problem with the Asian elephant. You have elephants that are hit by trains all over India, elephants that raid crops and are either outright shot, they're electrocuted, they throw Molotov cocktails on them. It's really, really difficult because we're encroaching onto so much of their migratory routes, and we're cutting down so much forest. If it's not for a highway, it's for another palm oil plantation, or it's just a city urbanization. You know, I think what's really important for people to understand about the Asian elephant is that we cannot, in our professional opinion, as a board of directors and Asian Elephant Support, and even a lot of people in the Elephant Managers Association, we feel that the best way to protect and preserve the Asian elephant is to promote Mahout culture, because Mahouts have been working with elephants for, like I said, thousands and thousands of years.
And
And
what are
they
Mahouts?
know Mahouts are the people that work with elephants. It used to be an elite status in their society, and it still is in some rural areas. And it is a person that knows the ins and outs of everything there is to know about elephants in a very old world way. And there are a lot of Western trainers who have gone over and worked with Mahouts in several different countries. And now a lot of people work together to bring Western welfare practices to kind of that older, almost shaman way of working with elephants as well, and blending the two styles so that we can give the best husbandry practices for these elephants that are living with people, because these people know literally everything you could possibly imagine about how an elephant's going to act and how to work with wild elephants. And what a lot of people don't understand is that elephants living with humans in captivity a lot of times are used to help drive away wild elephants away from farms and away from villagers. Do you still have Godzilla as your cell phone ring?
Yes.
And that's a really, really important part of keeping elephants in human care, is protecting villagers and protecting wild elephants from each other and helping guide them away. Because who's going to be able to speak an elephant language best is another elephant. One of our most, I guess, the projects we're the most proud of are the elephant back patrols in the island of Sumatra in Waikambas National Park. They disable snares. They help wildlife in trouble. They've even rescued several elephant orphans and brought them in and nursed them back to health. And what they do is they go out and they are on alert, and they will take elephants out of the forest and help go along the borders of where the villagers live and drive away wild elephants so that no one gets attacked, because wild elephants will attack you, especially if they're starving and they want your food. And just to keep the elephants safe too, because people get really incensed and they get really upset and they want to kill them when they're coming and taking their things, or they've killed their parents or something.
Yeah,
You know,
I'm about
so
to ask a really naive question.
go for it.
The thing about and this is entirely because I don't know anything about anything that you're talking about, obviously. So I mean, and I don't understand, obviously, what it's like to be in Eastern Asia, what the legal systems are, and all that. But I would think that at some point, and animals' rights. I mean, like when you talk about like poachers and everything, don't they have? Isn't it equivalent to murder to kill an elephant? I would think would be the law. It would be something
Yeah, it's
that would be
really not okay. Oh, you mean like if I were a farmer and I killed an elephant to protect my crops?
yeah.
You know, if it happens in the middle of nowhere, how is that enforceable?
So you're
Um,
saying it's already strictly regulated or controlled legislatively. It
you
doesn't
know,
matter.
I actually am only familiar with the Indian laws on that.
Okay.
And even that varies state by state.
Yeah.
It's really not something in
And,
any of our projects that
and
I've
then
ever really encountered.
yeah, and then there's
So I'd have to look that up.
there's religious considerations also that get a little squirrely when you talk about it. I mean, when I was in India, there was a guy that at the time that I was there was this Muslim man was drug out of his house by a herd of by a mob of Hindu who decided to kill this man because he was eating beef, and of course that's against their religion. So they're going to kill this other guy because of it, and then after they kill him is when they find out he was actually eating chicken. And nobody could be criminalized for this because they had a religious, righteous perspective, and that allowed the crime, which I thought was
Wow.
completely outrageous. So then there's things like that to consider. It,
Absolutely. I think when you think of the reverence overall that people have for elephants in India and a lot of those other countries, but then something like that happens, it's like, hey, wait a minute. Isn't this the living embodiment of Om, of Ganesha? What's the it's really tough whenever you have to get to the nitty-gritty of that. And I think the humanity of what these people experience um, is what is lost when you see a lot of videos, like of like an elephant hit by a train. Well, these animals are living in a world that they don't understand at all whatsoever. They don't know what a train is. They don't know what a street is. They don't know what any of this stuff is. And a lot of times it's an adolescent bull who's been kicked out of the herd, who's out rogue, experiencing must for the first time, and then bam, gets hit by a train. So it's kind of at the point now where every single loss is becoming even a bigger of a deal. And I'd say that for African elephants as well, because poachers always take out. They used to say that poachers would always take out the biggest tusker, but now we know and we have evidence, even in places like Cameroon and along equatorial Africa, they're killing 3, 4, 5-year-old African elephants and just cutting away the sulcus to get the new tusk growing in there. Like even the ivory this big is worth something that hasn't even protruded out of the sulcus yet. So
that's
it's very devastating.
that's pretty harsh.
It is. And that's kind of why when a lot of people ask me, how do I get into working with elephants? I don't discourage them because elephants need whoever is passionate about them. But at the same time, I try and let them know the realities of letting every day or every week sometimes getting bad news or seeing more pictures of dead elephants or more pictures of dead people that elephants have killed in like a village or something. And it's like, are you emotionally prepared? Are you in a place where you're okay with being on a sinking ship? And a lot of people are like, wait a minute, I thought it was all petting elephants and having a great time. I wish it was like that. And I thought that's what it was when I first started working with elephants in 2010. But it's just not. Unfortunately, I wish it was better, but it's just not. So, to talk about some of the fantastic projects that I know of with Asian elephants, There's a woman who does human-elephant conflict work with honeybees, African honeybees in Kenya. Her name is Dr. Lucy King, and she made these beehive fences to go around farmers' crops so that they won't get crop raided by the African elephants. Well, she started trying to do that in the island of Sri Lanka with Asian honeybees, and I think they've had mild success with it. Not as successful as the African honeybees because not many animals are as aggressive as an African honeybee. But they're trying that out over in Sri Lanka, and I think they've had okay success with it because elephants do not like bees. Another fantastic project I think I actually touched on it the other night, was the CRUs and the ERUs. And the CRUs are conservation response units. They're also called elephant response units. And they are elephants that live in human care on the island of Sumatra in Indonesia. And they live with a village of Mahouts, and they are called out as a patrol to patrol the forest, to disable wildlife snares, to find and help animals. For example, there was a mother and a calf stuck in a mud hole, and they were able to pull them out together. Hang on a second. There we go.
They were right over my shoulder.
Yeah, that happens to me too. Mine are just passed out, actually. So that's another fantastic project because it's actually headed by people who have Mahout experience for like the past 30 to 40 years. And we also have a very specialized elephant vet that lives and works with them in one of their Mahout villages. He's also an adjunct professor at the veterinary school in Aceh. And his name is Dr. Christopher Strema, and he actually started as an elephant keeper in Germany and then became an elephant veterinarian and then moved to Sumatra and has been there for a very long time, working hands-on with elephants. He does Mahout workshops, and the purpose for Mahout workshops is one of the things that we try to fund as often as possible and help organize, because you have people who are sometimes even illiterate in their own language, who are caring for animals that can live to be 65 years old, weigh 10,000 pounds, and eat 250 pounds of food a day. You know what I mean? Like, this is a really serious job. And while they may know the folk traditions of how to care for elephants, they are in desperate need of things like learning how to take care of a cracked toenail, learning how to change a diet for a pregnant female, learning how to mitigate a bull's must period in order to give him the best care possible. Even simple little things like if an elephant needs to be chained at night, how to alternate chains and how to wrap the chain in fire hose to keep the skin, in perfect condition at all times. Even how to give dewormer, because elephants, of course, can smell any medicine you put in their food. So how do you disguise something? Pro tip, it's strawberry frosting. That is usually a really good mask. So one of the other projects I really like is actually in the country of Laos. And there is a small community there that has tourist elephants. And I think they have somewhere between 60 and 90 tourist elephants that work out there. And what happens is on the off season, they don't have a lot of income. And this project has taken some hectares of forest and they are replanting native fruit trees and grasses that the elephants instinctively know how to self-medicate according to their blooming times and their fruiting times. And they have master PhD biologists out there recording these plants, and they're going to write a book and make a Mahout museum and display all of these different traditional plants that the Mahouts and the elephants know about and write it down so people like ourselves can even use that for Asian elephants in Western care and say, hey, if an elephant has gas, this is the kind of tree it's going to go eat when it's living in the middle of Laos. Super, super important. So the point is that on the off season, when the Mahouts cannot purchase food, they can come back to this place and graze for free and have free, clean water for their elephants, which is monumental for these creatures. Laos used to be called the land of 1 million elephants, and now there's like less than 1,000 in the whole country. So there's some pretty sad numbers. Like even Vietnam used to have tons of elephants, and they only have like 98 left in the whole country, and they're only in one province.
Vietnam has less than 100 elephants in the whole
Mhm.
country.
And they're only in the Dak Lak province. That's it. And some of them are in human care, and then the rest are wild. And it's like 70 wild elephants. It's hardly sustainable with something with a gestation period of, 2 years.
Gotcha. All right. Is there anything else we need to cover?
I can't think of anything. Did you have any other questions about any of those projects or anything else that sparked your interest
I
about
don't even
that?
know what questions to ask about those projects. I mean, I really don't. I mean, I was delighted to see that there are those, and I was hoping that
There's
there's like
some great work. Yeah.
Okay.
And the one thing about elephants that I will say is everyone loves them. If you can tell somebody very simply what they can do to help an elephant, and it's as simple as making sure you're buying sustainable palm oil, I think that's fantastic because, like I said before, you're all helping elephants, orangutans, pangolins, tigers, tapirs, everything, even the Komodo dragons. You know what I mean? And so I feel also that saving elephants and attempting to conserve them, it saves people too, because people and elephants in some cultures are already living together, but in other cultures, they're forced to live together. And if we can save elephants and keep them from hurting themselves and other people, we will ultimately save elephants.
That sounds like a good note to end on.
Yeah.
Vanessa, thank you very much.
Yeah.